hearing us talk a million times this week. So ask away. We'll start over here. Okay, we won't start over here. Where will we start? Any questions?
What are you going to do if nobody has a question?
Oh, I interview for a living, my dear. I think I can figure it out. Yes, ma'am.
Maria, you were talking about.
Real loud, stand up.
Maria, you were talking about the keto bread.
Yeah.
That's one of your things. What is the keto bread recipe? And do you also have like a kids kind of cooking recipe as well?
Yeah, the keto, repeat the question. What is the keto bread? It is on my blog, free, mariamindbodyhealth.com. If you search keto bread, you will find it. It is basically 0 total carbohydrates. Do not do the one with psyllium. That one has gotten really, really popular because it's the most like real bread. However, I stopped using that years and years and years ago. A lot of people call it the Diet Doctor bread. He did ask me to put on his site, but now it's his recipe, right? That's how it works. Kids Cookbook, that was one of the first self-published books I did write. It's only an ebook now, just because when Victory Bell does, the beauty of the book, and then they buy my self-published books, sometimes that social media gets mean and say, this is not as pretty as your other ones. I was like, well, yeah, I don't have the resources. But that was one of my first ones. So I was actually pre-kids. I just feel like I kind of eat like a kid, like the push pop thing and stuff. But yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?
Did Debbie have a question?
Oh, Debbie had a question, yeah.
Well, I was just, how important do you feel supplements are? Magnesium, multivitamins, all that kind of stuff.
I think it depends on your situation. For me, I still deal with a lot of hot sweats, so I do a lot of sweating, and I know I'm sweating out stuff that I need. So I will, if I feel hand cramp or leg cramp or anything, I'll take an electrolyte supplement to help with that. I think there are certain things. I have the MTHFR gene mutation from both parents, and so I probably take a little bit of extra folate, methylated folate for that. I tend to be vitamin D deficient, so I supplement with that. So it just depends on, it's very hard, in my opinion, to get all the nutrients that you need if you have certain situations that you're dealing with. Our goal is to eat real whole food, and you're going to have the best chance of getting all the nutrients that you need from that. But it just depends on your situation.
Now, I know that keto helps a whole lot with depression. What other things, supplements can help with that?
So what other supplements help with depression and other ailments?
So I took, when I was D deficient, I dealt with anxiety attacks and depression. Once I got my vitamin D up to where it needed to be, I was able to get off my Paxil and other stuff, and I haven't taken that since. I think 90% of the serotonin production in your gut, the serotonin production happens in your gut. So if you have gut health issues, it's probably going to affect your mood as well. Anybody else?
I have someone in my family, I'll keep it in the trust tree, but I did not bring D-hist. If you have high histamines, it actually blocks serotonin. And I see it in someone. You can guess which one it is, but yeah, I didn't bring D-hist, and especially with the different areas we're in, his histamines are really bothering him. I wish I would have brought it because it really affects his mood. So just knowing that if you do have high histamines, that in turn can cause depression, spots on your arms, rashes, things like that. You need magnesium to make serotonin. Yes, doctor.
I have a question from one of Nisha's Facebook viewers. How much vitamin D do we need, and is that the D3?
Yes, it is D3. You need about 1,000 IU's per 25 pounds you weigh. So my kids are 25 pounds. So they do, or if they're 50 pounds, so they do 2,000 IU's. That's just to maintain your levels. They lived on the equator. And I like to tell the story because you think living on the equator, the orphanage was outside. When we bring them to the United States, you have to do all these tests. Their vitamin D levels were in the low 30s, which I feel is too low. But they have a natural sunscreen. So it depends on your complexion, how much you need to take. You can do these tests at home now. You just prick your finger and send in a little blood sample. It's not, I don't like to do the blood thing, and it's not, scary at all. But I remember the last fall cruise, it was really enlightening. Who was talking about she had cholesterol build up under her eye? It was it was Dr. Atkins' nurse.
Jackie Everstein.
Jackie, where she feels, so I always thought I wanted it around 70, and she feels that 70 is too high.
Yeah.
And that's when she started to get these buildups under her eyes. And so around, 50 to 70 would be. Christine, you want to add to that?
For D3, I personally take 5,000 IU a day, and that kind of keeps it where it needs to be. It got to a point where I kind of, when I was severely deficient, I took the 10,000 IU a day, and then it got too high. I think it got to 118, yeah. And so my doctor looked at me and said, you need to back off a little bit. So I went back down to 5,000 IU a day, and that's what I do now.
I think with any supplement, make sure, I believe in getting tested and sort of looking at what your levels are, or taking an assessment. Don't randomly take supplements. I'm not a big fan of supplements for no reason, like thinking that you need D and then you take D and you turn out you're high in D. I'm naturally high in vitamin D, so I really cringe when people are like, hey, everybody needs vitamin D, but that's not the case. So yeah, everybody, it depends on the person. So supplements it's a case by case scenario.
Potassium is especially dangerous.
Microphone.
Oh, I was just gonna say, potassium is one of those that you need to be careful about too, because if you take too much of that, I see people online, talking about, well, you just take this much potassium, but they're not taking into account the potassium that's in their food too. And so I get concerned. You're absolutely right. You should know where you stand as far potassium, especially too, is a big one.
Well, a lot of minerals there's therapeutic and then detrimental. Depending on, there's a bell curve of optimal.
So is it the water soluble that'll get urinated out, and is the fat soluble you need to be concerned about, or are there distinctions there?
That's a good question. Your fat soluble vitamins, obviously, they act differently in the body, and I'm not sure the mechanism how that works. If you take too much of that, whether it builds up in the body, maybe someone else can answer that. I know that some of the vitamins you do just excrete them out. Vitamin C, if you take too much of that, you definitely excrete that out. Disaster pants, and magnesium, the same thing too, especially magnesium citrate. Anybody have any thoughts about the fat soluble vitamins and how they work in the body? Because I'm not exactly sure.
I may have to go a lifetime.
Yeah, they do build up, but I'll say like vitamin K, you want to make sure that you're distinct. I think this is like more like the always ask your doctor. I don't feel like we should be talking about this. And do you agree? Yeah.
I think it depends on if you're talking about supplementation or if you're trying to do it with food.
They're talking about supplements, and I guess I always say always check with your doctor whenever I make recommendations for supplements, just because I don't want to get sued. But there is a difference between K2 and K1, and yeah. And there's, if you're taking a medication, there's always interactions. Like blood pressure usually has potassium already in it. So, yeah.
I would say, focus on real food.
Focus on real food.
You can get most of what we're talking about from real food.
Beef.
Beef give you a lot of potassium. So most of the vitamins you can get by eating just real food. So if you're looking to try to hit macros and you're using, liquid oils to get that fat ratio versus eating your meat, you're probably not going to get the actual vitamins and the micronutrients you need.
I threw away about $200 worth of fish oil supplements. What's that?
You should have called me. I would take it.
Why?
No, I'm kidding.
Because I feel that it can build up in your body, and those are very heat sensitive oils.
Yes.
And we eat plenty of quality egg yolks, salmon, all of that stuff. Like Micah loves sardines and anchovies. I mean, how cool is that? But I honestly just threw them away. I wasn't even gonna give them to like anybody.
Never buy your omega-3 supplements from the stores. Ever.
They're rancid already.
They're rancid. Sorry. So I'm not on the panel, but I think it's important.
Yeah, we don't take supplements at our house because we try to focus on getting everything from the food. But there is, there's some people, just like if you have the MTHR, like you have to have a special kind of vitamin D. You need to know that. You have to do testing to know whether or not you should do that, because that's very important, especially if you have depression or something like that. But for the most part, we're just eating meat and real food and good fats, and now take iodine, and that's supplement. But that's because I'm freezing right now. I can totally tell that I didn't have my iodine. I didn't bring it, like an idiot.
I forgot mine too.
Yeah, and magnesium for sleeping and stuff like that. But anything, vitamin A or anything, we don't do that. We just get it from beef.
And most people, they think of vitamins and minerals as like a supplement pill. But actually, in Real Food Keto, we're going to have a really nice little chart in there that kind of shows you, okay, if you're looking for A, D, E, K, here's the best food sources for it. If you're looking for the mineral magnesium, here's the best foods for it. So stop buying vitamins, trying to eat real food. And if you need to shore up certain vitamin, then maybe supplements work in that instance. But for the most part, real whole foods is what you're looking for.
And I heard you mentioned organ meat, and I did that chart too in our book. And everybody's like, okay, so how can I do organ meat? I don't like it, right? You're going, yeah, me too, right? So what I do, here are my keto hacks. I have Craig grind it up because I don't even want to know what's in there, and I make it in chili. It's really spicy. You don't even know that there's a whole liver. I mean, so you use like maybe a 4-to-1 ratio, whatever you can handle. If you can do 2-to-2, use quality organic sources, and you just grind it up just like it's hamburger. And I make meatloaf, meatballs, you name it, my keto hack is always have a little bit of organ meat in there. You don't even know what's in there, and it's like getting a huge vitamin dose in there.
Yeah.
What
she said. We are looking into getting one of our butchers to like mix up organ meat with our ground beef to make, our burgers would be just like super burgers. So just like that's the same thing. Or you could do that at your house. I think the KitchenAid things have like the grinders that you could just do that yourself. Yeah, you do it?
No,
No?
but US Wellness sells pre-ground beef, also 55% fat ground beef, and also with the organ meat. I order that,
Awesome.
and my son doesn't know the difference.
You can do. I know they sell, a lot of companies sell like freeze-dried, kind of an organ complex. There's a company we use called paleovalley.com. And it's a mixture of all these different ones in a freeze-dried form. And then when Christine was pregnant, when we were trying to get pregnant, we had her on liver, and I sliced raw liver and made it into like a little pill, froze it solid, and then you can take it like a pill that way. And you don't taste it at all. Did you taste it at all when we did that?
Oh, just eat it. It's good.
You could make probably a
It's good.
Yeah.
a
One of
smoothie.
those ones that like liver and onions, right?
I like it rare, and that's.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah, go.
When we're talking about liver, so we talk about the economy of eating keto, right? So obviously based on what you can afford. But when you're focusing on liver or some of the organ meats, if you're going to spend money, that's when I would spend money preferentially, because all the toxins are going to be built up mostly in the organs, especially in the liver.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go out and get yourself some liver from local supermarket, you kind of want to know what that animal's been eating. And this is when you really want to focus with like a local butcher that you trust. You can go see the animals, make sure they're not sick, and then try to work with them, or get the desiccated, frozen kind of stuff.
If you're here, I'm assuming you understand grass-fed. So, but thank you for the caveat. My friend that does keto ketchup says throw ketchup on it. It makes it taste better. All right, so,
Debbie, do you have a question?
oh, Debbie had another question.
I was gonna move on this unless somebody else has further.
Oh, we have bunches of questions. We just wondered.
Okay, that's good.
All right, so somebody over here.
I was just gonna ask
Yeah.
Nisha about the new salt, doesn't that have,
Yeah, that's potassium.
so you're taking potassium that way?
But very rarely now. Now, but when I first started and I was going through like the process, I needed to keep my electrolytes more in check then. And so that's when I was using it for the Keto and we do our Keto recipe. It's on YouTube. And that's when I was using it. These days, I'm not struggling like that. And yay. Yeah. Yeah. But you know, I'm keto adapted now. And so my electrolytes aren't as in, you know, limbo as when I first began.
Yes, okay.
You're talking about vitamins and supplementation and help from your doctor to make sure that you're not taking the wrong thing, whatever. But what do you say to them in order to get whatever it is, a vitamin panel or whatever, so
Yep.
you know exactly what
That's what you asked
to
for.
either be eating more of or taking for supplementation.
Have him run the
I used
panel.
to get poo-poo on a laptop.
Have him run the panel or someone run the panel, and then you find the foods that are keto friendly that fit that mold.
It's called the vitamin panel.
It's called right there,
Vitamin and mineral status, so your doctor will know what you're talking about.
If you
Just
say the vitamin panel, they should know what that is.
Okay, they should go along with it.
Is there a technical term for the panel?
No,
No,
because he may not want to check
you might
it.
not want it, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, you can do it in one of these private MD labs, e-lab tests now, it's like we talked about the other day.
I work with a lot of athletes. I refer people to, locally, I refer them to a naturopath doctor who will run anything I ask her to. And, or I have some other people online that I refer, a functional medicine doctor that I refer people to online for my clients who are not local. So I think it's, for people who are, if you have a doctor that's not, doesn't want to work with you, I would agree with Jimmy, fire them and find a doctor. I don't want to spend the time, wasting my time trying to convince anybody to do something, so that's why I just found doctors that I like and then I now refer people to them.
And by the way, I have a resource for a ketogenic doctor, ketogenicdocs.com. I created that many years ago as a blog and I just revamped it. It's all priority now, as
That's hard
Dr.
work.
Barry would say.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
it's
Jimmy.
a lot of hard work, but
Yes.
ketogenicdocs.com.
Are we on there?
Of course.
You refer to?
I refer people to a functional medicine practitioner. His name is Andy Baptist, and he's in San Francisco. And then I refer people to Dr. Grady. She's a naturopath doctor. In Arizona, naturopath doctors are licensed. So there's some naturopath doctors that aren't licensed, and I don't know the benefits or not benefits. I know there's differences, but she's a licensed doctor, and I refer people to her. She's out of Tucson, but I believe she does online appointments as well. Her name's Dr. Elizabeth Grady.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
My fiance is wanting to start keto after the new year, and I'm worried that he's not going to be fully committed. Is there any risk that he kind of have?
You're just getting rid of like some.
Because I'm worried about the fat. If he
But
still
you're
has
not
the
adding
sugar.
fat just to add fat. Like that's where I think that I don't know if I should be talking, but I feel that you don't have to just like throw sticks of butter in your mouth.
No.
You're just eating real food.
Okay.
And if he decides to have some pasta or whatever behind your back, he's still like you eating real, like, cause I get this question all the time. I want my kids to go keto, but I know they're gonna go to school and they're gonna grab the Skittles. And I was like, okay, so at home you can have this for them. And they're like, well, aren't they gonna gain a lot of weight? Well, just don't throw butter in their face and that type of stuff. Just give them, you know, steak and real food. And I guess, you know, you don't have to, this whole idea that you need to eat 70% fat or you're not keto is not true whatsoever.
Can we go into that a little bit? Because a lot of the questions that I get, and several on here have already asked about this, of macronutrient ratios. And that's the stupidest thing in the world, you guys. Stop eating macronutrient ratios because they're all predicated on calories, which
You mean percentages?
from
Percentages.
the percentages. When we talk about like 75, 25, that's percentages, and the percentages are based on a certain number of calories for the various macronutrients.
If you focus on percentages, you will fail.
Yeah.
You will fail.
No, go ahead, finish.
I was just gonna say, like, every body is different, and we have different muscle mass, and you want to eat to your lean body mass and focus on that and what your goals are. I don't know, maybe your husband doesn't need to lose any weight, right? I mean, you just have to find out. Everybody's different in this journey, and your body type is different, and your muscle mass is different. So, and as you get smaller, you're gonna have to eat differently and that type of stuff.
Maria, can you just go back and say that one more time, because I have people so focused on percentages and numbers.
Yes.
You are going to fail if you focus on percentages. You will.
My dear.
70% fat is not, I mean, unless you're like, maybe for fertility or something like that. But no, don't.
Thank you.
What does he eat now?
Like a college kid, beer and pizza.
So 80% keto would be much better.
I was just gonna say, like, just prepare pizzas that are gonna be
Yes.
easy for him to transition into. That was the hardest part for a lot of people that I've talked to is, I love pizza or I love chicken strips or whatever. And she's got a whole blog full of free recipes.
And
And
look up Fathead Pizza. There's really
right,
great
but actually Chrisless pizza is you start out with fathead dough, but then go to Chrisless pizzas, or like what she does is she just makes a ton of pizzas and she puts them in the freezer, and that way when you're not around, he's gonna eat behind your back. He really just has to go to the freezer, just like the Tostitos, put it in the oven, just like the Tostitos, and heat it up, and then he's got something. Tostitos pizza, frozen pizza.
Can I just say one more thing on the pizza? Real good pizza.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I grew up on frozen pizza, and homemade pizza is great. I'm a foodie now, but there's something about that weird frozen pizza taste. It has that. It really does. And not only is he a really cool small business owner, it tastes good. And when we got off the cruise in May, we stayed overnight in a hotel before our flight. We found some. They're at Walmart. They're everywhere, and it's made with a chicken crust.
He's got a new one that's made with cauliflower crust.
Yeah.
He said if you like that.
Hey, those
Real
vegetables.
Good
Real good foods.
pizza.com.
Yeah.
Because he does enchiladas now with like the chicken wrap and stuff. So
Yeah, they're at Kroger,
No,
they're at
no.
Walmart,
I didn't know
Target.
about those.
Look around.
They're good.
I'll have to order those.
mailed to your house. You don't go to the store.
Perfect,
Yeah.
because that's what he eats, like that kind of thing.
There you go. There's your start.
I can't help you with the beer. No.
All right, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm actually trying to help people with this, with the transition, and a lot of times that people will say to me, you keep saying real food, but I'm eating all this meat and I'm not going to the back room, and especially in the back, the beginning when people have that transition of trying to, and they'll say to me, if I could have my fiber and my vegetables.
No. Do newborn babies poo? Do they get any fiber? No. You don't need fiber to go poo.
Simple water.
Also, there's a big difference between being constipated and just not needing to go to the bathroom, which a lot of people get confused about. They think if they're not using the bathroom every single day, then that means they're constipated. But constipation actually is needing to go, it being uncomfortable and hard to, like, you're on, you guys know. Okay, that's constipation. But the fact that it's been 2 days and I haven't used the bathroom, that's not constipation.
That's because you don't have any.
That's because you're eating, right. The process of digestion is getting rid of crap, literally, from your body. And when you're eating more clean, you don't have as much crap to get rid of. And therefore, you're not going to go every day sometimes. especially once you get to the point where you are keto adapted.
Christine, tell the story about your dad.
So this is pretty funny. My dad called me, and you know you have a good relationship with your dad when you can talk to him about his poop. So my dad said, let me preface this by saying my mom wanted him to go on a probiotic, so I ordered a probiotic that I have access to for them. And so my dad calls me up one day and he goes, I'm pooping every day now. Is that a good thing? I'm like, well, what were you doing before? He goes, well, I was going every 3 days, something like that. And I knew his history. He's constipated. He sits in the bathroom for a long period of time, has trouble going. And so at that time he wasn't eating right, and he's sort of doing he's doing keto now. And so I think that in combination with the probiotic has kind of helped it, but it was just really funny to hear my dad say, am I supposed to go every day? Yeah. I was like, are you having diarrhea? No, it's just normal, So I think in that regards, you need to look at your gut health too to see what's going on there. If you're having diarrhea, diarrhea is a sign of maybe a food sensitivity because your body's trying to get rid of it really quickly. And then so constipation could be dehydration, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think probiotics would be a good thing to do too if you are having trouble with constipation.
And from food sources if you can, right?
So Christine gave the talk on low stomach acid. A lot of times what people can't poop, their body's not digesting the food. So if you eat something and you feel like you just ate a brick, and that's a good, and Christine talked, 30 minutes on it. So
Say that what people will say, well, it's too much meat for me. I can't do
well,
this. You can poop on the So I was just wondering what you say to people.
So dairy and nuts, which a lot of keto people are living off of, hence like fathead pizza. Dairy and nuts are constipating. Get rid of the dairy and nuts. I've written many books on no dairy, no nuts. You won't even know that they disappeared because everybody's like dipping like macadamia nuts and cream cheese. You will get constipated. It's not the steak, it's the butter on the steak causing the constipation.
Now,
What was your recommendation?
hold on, raise hands, guys, raise hand. Everybody can't talk at the same time. One more time.
What is your recommendation for people who feel that they're constipated? I mean,
Cut out the dairy and the nuts.
and that's it.
And stay hydrated.
And probiotic foods. You gave us lots of recipes for keto that are very probiotic friendly.
Yes.
What exactly are they saying that it's causing they can't eat meat? Is that what you're saying?
They're basically saying this keto diet's too heavy in me because I can't digest it.
Yeah, they may have low stomach acid.
But they're just eating meat?
No. they're
So
not.
how do they know it's meat?
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what Maria means. Like they're assuming it's the meat because that's
Unite, right?
right.
Are you going number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what
Can we have that kind of relationship now? Are you crapping?
Not at this moment.
But I think that's what Maria is getting at here is that like they're assuming it's the meat, but they're not only eating meat, so
Right.
they don't know that it's the meat. They just think because society has said, red meat's bad for your colon, that that's what, and you need fiber,
Yeah.
right? But
And you're exactly right. That's exactly what happens.
so
It's well, I've heard red meat's bad for your colon.
right,
Exactly what you just said. And so then I don't know what to say.
right. It's the perception. So I would tell them to cut out everything but the meat and see what happens, and then slowly maybe reintroduce things very slowly, individually. Maybe the nuts back into it, see how they go, and then maybe dairy. But it's probably not the meat.
Yes, ma'am.
This isn't a question, this is just a statement. I want to thank Nisha for one time on the internet, she said, keto is not one size fits all, and we are all different. And I thank her for that. It looks a little different for every single one of us. Find what works and keep doing it. And that was so encouraging. I love you.
You said it just for her.
Yes, I keep saying.
I did, yes.
I tell them all the time, I say, working on it. When Nisha told me
Yeah, bio-individuality.
Yes, we're all made differently. We're all a special snowflake. What did you say? A special butterfly. We're all special butterflies.
Some more special than others. Anybody else? Questions? Yes, ma'am, right there.
All right, for Maria. If and when you do use a sweetener for something sweet for your kids or something, what is your number one go-to sweetener?
It depends on what I'm making. Cookies, then you need a bulking agent. I mean, it comes back to science. Most of the time when I'm making like push-ups or something that does not need a bulking agent, it's usually stevia glycerite and a mixture. So most people find stevia very bitter and they don't like it and they're turned off. So there's something called stevia glycerite, which is a thick honey-like substance. You need a little bit more than you would with stevia, like more like a teaspoon rather than like 4 drops.
What they mix with that? Stevia and what else?
It's like a vegetable glycerin.
Is it benign? Like a fiber?
There's no.
It's just so thick.
It's just, yeah. But that's really palatable. And then I'll add something else, maybe Lohan Go or monk fruit extract. Make sure it's extract and not monk fruit because that is different. You find the ways to blend them. Do I write recipes like this? No, but I do have these tips on my blog because everybody's going to be like, okay, now I have to add 3 of them. But if you're really picky on your palate, some people are super tasters, so they're not going to like. Those are the people that like tried Diet Coke once. They're like, oh, right? You know, those are super tasters, right? If you need a bulking agent, then you need something like erythritol. Okay, a lot of people like Lancanto or Swerve. Those are the brands, and so they're mixed with erythritol and maybe stevia or Lohan Go, something like that. But blending them makes things taste better. But most of the time, it's actually a good question. I actually usually never use erythritol, if you know, in the trust tree, but that's more well known. But when I like make ice cream, I just put some drops of stevia in there. When you get rid of that, even heavy cream starts to taste sweet. And almond milk, like that stuff starts to taste sweet. So you need less, and so you add just maybe a little bit of stevia in there, and that's all you need. What I tell people is taste it before you make it into ice cream because it's gonna taste like that. If you want more, add a little more. You can always add more, you know, otherwise you have to add more cream or something like that. If you're baking something, use less sweet or use more when you taste the batter. Always check with your doctor when you eat raw eggs. I'm just kidding. Hey, there's some mean people out there. But I make ice cream, or whenever you make a baked good, some of that sweetness will bake off. It's not like sugar, it's different. So making cookies, a cake, something like that. We rarely have cookies, cake, things like that. It's more usually like something easy, like push pop or ice cream.
Anybody else? Yes, Debbie.
The question's been asked a lot on the internet and hair loss.
When I first started keto, I was really broken, and I lost a lot of hair, but I felt better. And so I was like, I'm just going with it, and it all grew back. But then I read an article on Dr. Ead's website that when you change your diet, it's a shock to your system. And a lot of times your hair will stop growing and then restart growing again. You'll lose a lot of hair, but it'll come back. And that's the advice. I usually send a link to Dr. Ead's article and tell my story that I lost a lot of hair. It was really, it would come out in clumps, like the bathtub or shower would be full of hair, but it all came back and I got better, felt better. So I think it's just part of your body learning to use a new fuel source and the shock to the body of changing your diet. But I know that I get that question a lot, and that's the answer I give them, and it seems to satisfy my clients. So yeah, hang in there, it'll get better and your hair will grow back. Just, don't freak out.
Spell that, Dr. E.
EADS, it's proteinpower.com is the website.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. My keto.
Me. We were just talking about this yesterday. Funny fact. But I agree with everything you just said, but also what's very important, Maria?
Amino acids,
Which come from?
protein.
Oh my gosh.
It's like meat is important.
Do the kind of amino acids matter?
Yeah, there's complete amino acids and there is incomplete amino acids. This is why vegetarians, people go vegan, they lose hair too. Again, any extreme change in diet, whether you're going to do Weight Watchers or whatnot, you're going to have hair loss. But if you're living off of fat bombs or doing the online thing of fat fasts, where all you eat is fat for a week, you will lose a lot of hair.
Very important.
So
protein.
eat your meat.
And thyroid too. Like if you haven't had your labs drawn, it's not all the keto. It could be many reasons why women especially lose their hair. Hormones have a lot to do with it. Low iron. It's just, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, I don't have the problem. Maria doesn't have that problem.
When you lose a lot of weight too pretty fast, and that happens with some women on keto, sometimes not, sometimes it is very fast, your progesterone levels will drop. Low progesterone, you're going to start losing your hair.
Any other questions? Yeah, way in the back.
There's a product called Carbolose for baking.
It has gluten in
Full
it.
of soy as well. Gluten and soy.
Gluten and soy. Soy is estrogenic. If you want to have a big soy estrogenic belly, you want to get rid of all soy, flax, chia, all of those things are estrogenic. Just like those are no good, no yucky.
Read the ingredients on anything like that, and it's very clear. It's right there. You just have to read the ingredients.
First rule of Keto Club is read the label.
Not just the carb counts,
Yeah.
but the label.
So if I'm gonna test my blood and my ketones, what time of day and at what point before I eat, after I eat, and blah, blah, blah?
I'm gonna phone my friends over there for that.
Oh, Jimmy does this.
He's a gadget guy.
All right, so if you're gonna test, it depends on what time of day you're testing. You want to test at various times because your morning readings will be a lot different than say 1 hour postprandial, which is after eating, and then late in the day. So when I wrote Keto Clarity and I did my 1 year experiment of nutritional ketosis, what I found was that in the morning, you tended to have your lowest ketone reading. It's not that way for everybody, but it tends to be your lowest of the day. How many of that's true for you guys? Okay, good number of you. So yeah, I'll be like 0.7, 0.8 in the morning. And then in the evening, test at least 4 hours after your final meal. So if you eat your final meal, which you shouldn't do it too late, then that's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, test that, and that will tend to be one of your highest readings of the day. It should be about double what your morning reading was. So if your morning was 0.8, you should be around like a 1.5, 1.6 in the evening. Don't worry about it if you're not exactly there. Now, as far as glucose goes, we talked about some of the issues with glucose the other day, that in the morning, sometimes you'd have a little bit elevated. That's that glucose sparing effect that we talked about in my book, The Keto Cure. And it's a good thing in the context of your A1C being sub 5.5 and ideally under 5.0. And so if you're testing how a food is impacting you, then you test at baseline before you eat, then you eat at 1 hour postprandial, 2 hour postprandial, 1 hour postprandial. You're trying not to see it jump more than 35, 40 points. If it goes really high, really fast, that's probably not a good thing. But the more important thing is how quickly do you recover from it, so that 2 hour postprandial becomes so important. So if you start at 85 and 2 hours postprandial, you still have a blood sugar level over 100. That ain't good. And so that's something you probably should avoid. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, so but am I testing twice a day for a little
So
while?
yeah, so a lot of people say, well, it's really expensive to test so often. And yeah, when I tested, those blood ketone strips in 2012, pre-Keto Mojo, pre-Keto Clarity, and pre-Keto being the biggest thing. They were $5 each. I finally got a guy in Australia. He said, "Hey, Mike, we get them for 70 cents here, Mike. I'll send you a bunch." So he did, and I was able to test a lot. But at first, it was $5 a piece. Anyway, you have to sell a lot of books to be able to get that money back. But so anyway, what if you have to do it on the cheap? Test in the morning, say on Monday. Test in the evening, say on like Thursday, and then flip it the next week. And then you get 2 readings during the week, and you see the trend over time. I don't think you have to obsess about your blood ketones, but if you're just starting, you kind of get a good measure. I did it for a whole year, daily, sometimes every hour on the hour. I did about 6 times every hour on the hour during that experiment. And it's fascinating to watch, but don't obsess about the numbers. I think in general, if you stay in that 1 to 2 range, that's probably going to be therapeutic level of nutritional ketosis.
So I actually want to ask you, I'm an athlete, and so mine are really low. And yeah, go for it, because I just want to add that athlete part.
Endurance athletes won't have high ketones because your body's using them. Initially, I have a lot of people, athletes take longer, long-term endurance athletes take longer to adapt because a lot of them are very insulin resistant.
Is inflammation high also contributing?
Not necessarily. Not even. I don't know. But I know that their blood sugar typically is never super low, like in the 70s. It's usually in the 80s and 90s. Peter Defty, who I used to work for, is a friend of mine. He confirmed that. And he works with more elite athletes. I work with more everyday athletes. So their blood sugar typically is normal range. A lot of athletes, they get excited when they first start making the ketones, like in the strips. And I said, well, just wait, because your body's going to start using them and you won't see them in the urine anymore. And then when you stop seeing them in the urine, that's where you're going to start feeling really bad. And they do. But then they start measuring their ketones, and their ketones never get to like 1.5. Usually they're in the 0.5 to 1.2 range typically. And I think it's because the body's using ketones for fuel. And they're in the blood. So that's the blood ketones. And usually, typically, a lot of endurance athletes who measure in the urine, once you start using the ketones, they won't even show up in the urine at all. Like they'll be clear.
It actually, the acetoacetate turns into beta-hydroxysteroid,
Right.
which is the urine to blood. John.
All right, one thing on ketones. So if you're fat adapted, most of the energy that you're actually using are fatty acids, not ketones. So there is this problem with using ketones as your metric. And we have this concept where we chase ketones, where everybody's looking at their ketones and really excited because they're 2 or really depressed because they're 0.5. When you're keto adapted, or if you're an athlete or you do a lot of exercise, most of your organs are going to use fatty acids, so fat, for energy. And a little bit of the byproduct will be ketones, so they might not be as high as somebody else. So just keep that in mind.
I just tell people, like, if you, because I coach endurance athletes, if you show ketones on your meter, like, then you're in ketosis because they're showing your body's obviously making ketones, but don't get real freaked out about the number. And I have some people who get really freaked out, and I'm like, chill out. But because as long as you have all the good effects, you have the mental clarity, you have the athletic performance, you have low inflammation, you feel good, you're performing well, you're breaking your own records. And because I'm coaching people, we do functional threshold power test, we do functional threshold pace test. We're doing tests, and we're like, well, you were able to hold 200 watts of power for 20 minutes and you beat your previous time. You were faster. So that's what we're actually testing results. We're testing how did you do on the last race? What were your power numbers? What intensity are you able to hold? And what's your heart rate at that intensity? Because you want low heart rate, fast pace or high power is really sort of what I'm looking for with the athletes, because we're trying to get an end result of crossing that finish line faster and before people. So
I've tested my ketones a grand total of 1 time. and that was at KetoCon because the guy was like, "Oh no, it was the breath of the level, which is oh my god, so expensive."
That's the one, so expensive.
Right, and I was in ketosis, but I don't care about that because I can tell that I feel good, I have energy, my brain is functioning properly. I don't have to go what, because that was what I was doing when I had my markers were super high for Hashimoto's and all that stuff, and I'm not gaining weight, and like all the symptoms are gone. So that's what matters, not the number. And there's everybody posts their pictures of their ketone meter, and I think that feeds into the number thing. But it's how you feel. It's very important.
And higher isn't necessarily better.
Exactly.
And you can manipulate it too with the use of MCT oil and a lot of these MCT types of products, exogenous ketones, which I know John is doing an experiment right now with. They can also artificially raise your ketone levels. I had this guy send me this thing called a ketone ester. They've been in where Richard Beach is the guy that created this. And in 15 minutes, I went from 1.1 to 5.7 in my blood ketones. You feel that, by the way, when you do that. I need to give you some, John. So
I've tried them.
Oh, have you tried that one?
Yeah.
Did you have a similar reaction? Yeah. And it's like flush. Anyway, so you can manipulate to make it look like it's really high, but it means nothing, especially in the context of how you feel. I think that's what we're all saying here. Is that matters so much more than what some machine is telling you. And by the way, that machine is prone to be flawed as well at times. So you can't use it as gospel. Anybody else? All right, guys, I think we're done. All right, guys, that's the Keto 101 cruise.